Hello everyone. Today we will be discussing Sean O'Casey's drama The Shadow of a Gunman. This is a drama in 2 acts by Sean O'Casey. It was performed at the Abbey Theatre in Dublin in 1923 and later published in 1925. Originally titled On the Run, it was the 5th play O'Casey wrote, but it was the first to be produced. The tragicomedy play is set in the tenement slums of Dublin in 1920 amidst guerrilla fighting between the Irish Republican Army and the Black and Tans of the British police force. The Shadow of a Gunman takes place in the middle of the disturbances of the Troubles caused by the Irish Rebellion of 1916 and the ensuing war between the Irish and British in the country. But its focal point is not the battleground. Rather, the focus is on a tenement, and the characters are not traditionally heroic but very human who have their own flaws. The most significant character is Donald Davoren, a poet who has no interest in the communal or political life of his country. He lives instead in a world of words and dreams as he makes efforts to create beauty in a Dublin tenement. Sean O'Casey was born in 1880 and had a bitter and difficult boyhood in a Dublin tenement house himself. He was an Irish dramatist and memoirist. A committed socialist through and through, he was the first Irish playwright of note to write about the Dublin working classes. He never went to school but got educated in the streets of Dublin. He taught himself to read and write at the age of 14. He did odd jobs as a newspaper seller, docker, stone breaker, railway worker and builder's labourer. In 1913, he helped to organize the Irish Citizen Army, which battled in the streets of Dublin. At the same time, he was busy educating himself on the dramatic techniques by reading Shakespeare and watching the plays of Dion Boucilaut. His early plays were performed at the Abbey Theatre, Dublin. After visiting America in the late 30s, O'Casey settled in Devonshire. He lived there until his death in 1964. He still continued to draw the themes of many of his plays from the life he knew so well on the banks of the Liffey. Sean O'Casey created a flamboyance and versatility out of the ceaseless dramatic experimenting in his plays. These plays give the impression of bigness of mind that is inseparable from his tragic-comic vision of life. The Shadow of a Gunman was written in 1923 by Sean O'Casey and set during the Irish War of Independence. It centers on the mistaken identity of a building tenant who is thought to be an IRA assassin. It is first in O'Casey's Dublin Trilogy, the other 2 being Juno and the Paycock 1924 and The Plough and the Stars 1926. Sean O'Casey's Dublin plays revolve around the experiences and the responses of Dublin tenement dwellers during times of civil war. Sean O'Casey portrays the life in Dublin and of the families living in the tenements, which produces an intimate atmosphere. On one hand, the Dublin Trilogy is not only realistic, but the circumstances shown can often be taken symbolically. They may be looked upon as examples taken out of Dublin life. At the same time, they disclose conditions that are universal and may be relocated to any other country. On the other hand, the Dublin Trilogy draws lucid and separate pictures of the characters involved. Most characters are faced with existentialist situations. They can no longer live an ordinary life, but they must choose life to be either this way or that way. A lot of characters show a devout religious belief. Some are truly faithful, some are frauds, others support a humanistic point of view. As the Dublin plays deal with characters from poor and uneducated working class, one may not expect clear and complex philosophical theories arising out of this play. However, the characters make attempts to explain metaphysical queries such as the origin and the sense of human life itself. Behind their everyday life, there are assumptions explaining the relation between the individual, the society, and the world as such. The play is about the tragedy of the unintentional participation in war of a poet called Donald Davoren and a peddler named Seamus Shields. The play is set in Dublin in 1920 during the guerrilla warfare involving the Irish Rebellious Republican Army and the British forces. The peddler Seamus Shields takes into his apartment Donald Davoren, a struggling, self-proclaimed poet whom the neighbors mistake for a courageous IRA warrior. Davoren takes pleasure in his newfound disrepute, especially when Minnie Powell falls in love with the representation of him as the romantic gun poet. In the meantime, a real patriot, Shields' friend Maguire, clandestinely hides a bag full of homemade bombs in the unwary Shields' room and then goes off to an ambush that proves deadly. After that, during the resulting curfew, the auxiliary guard descends on the apartment. They discover Maguire's bombs. Both Shields and Davoren panic, but Minnie recovers the bag and conceals it in her room. As a result, she is arrested, and when she tries to escape, she is shot to death. It is the shock of Minnie's death that exposes Davoren to be a coward. The most important characteristic of the play is that it depicts a shadowland. Donald's poetry is clearly terrible. His roommate Seamus has become a local figure of mockery because he spends hours selling a single packet of hairpins. Young Tommy Owens wishes to die for his country, but hasn't got the guts to fight for it. Minnie Powell wishes to be a gunman's girlfriend because of the status it will give her. Adolphus Grigson acts as if he is brave when in reality he is a coward. Mr. Gallagher expects IRA gunmen to resolve his quarrels with his neighbors over whether their children are noisy. This is a world of intolerable noise where 7 to 8 people live in a single room. Every character in the play is trapped in a daydream that they have no prospect of turning into reality. Worst of all, Donald Davoren feeds these fantasies by allowing himself to be mistaken for a gunman on the run, in the hope that this will facilitate him to seduce Minnie. There is a real gunman in the play, and there are real bombs. There are real soldiers too, and real deaths. But all this reality which takes place off stage, even the deaths are invisible to the audience. The play is caught up deep in a world of shadows, illusions, and futile fantasies. By the end, Davoren has seen through to some painful truths. He realizes that Minnie is brave and that he is a coward. He also knows that he is responsible for her death. But the rest of the characters are barely affected, and he is still ensnared in their world of shadows and still sending forth terrible poetry. The audience is never sure if it can take these characters seriously enough to regard anything that happens to them as tragic. The central irony of the play is that they are all too imperfect to attain the dignity of a single tragic failing. Donald Davoren. He is central to the action of this play. In the beginning, he is represented as a wistful, idealistic poet who is harmless in the extreme. However, as the play progresses, Davoren's self-importance proves to have tragic consequences. The people in the tenement mistake him for an IRA gunman who is hiding with Seamus Shields. They hastily make a hero of him, and Minnie Powell, who is straightaway attracted by the romance of a real live gunman on the run. He seems to revel in the attention he receives from the other inhabitants of the tenement, especially the romantic advances of Minnie Powell. Davoren never admits that he is not the war hero everybody thinks he is. This leads to the tragic death of Minnie, as she takes the bombs from his room as a sign of her love for him. By saving him, she dies herself. Davoren is exactly as the title of the play suggests, a mere shadow. He doesn't work, nor does he make any positive contribution to the people around him. Minnie Powell. When we first meet Minnie Powell in the play, she is portrayed as a young, uneducated girl who works hard for a living. She is romantically attracted to Donald Davoren, who she believes is an IRA gunman on the run. She is fascinated by the adventure and excitement of the gunman. Minnie shows great guts when she takes the bag of bombs from Donald and Seamus's room. She believes that the soldiers will treat her better if she is caught because she is a woman. Her love and dedication to Donald leads to her death as she is shot in the fight outside on the street. Minnie shows strong nationalistic beliefs throughout the play. She is undoubtedly the tragic heroine of the play. She gives her life for the love of a man and for the love of her nation, Ireland. Seamus Shields is extremely pious. He always brings religion in his talks. He is more superstitious than a firm believer. In earlier days, Shields was a soldier of the Irish Republican Brotherhood. Critics have commented that his exaggerated piety is due to his disappointment in the national movement. Mr. and Mrs. Grigson are quite simple-minded. They always pretend to be very religious, but their behavior, often drawn comically, shows that finally they do not really understand what is going on around them. Tommy Owens is a mere boaster. His behavior in Act 1 is shown ironically enough to indicate his absolute stupidity. He is an example of someone without any honest consideration about the state of the world and of mankind. Literary critics argue that while Davoren may be portrayed as non-deviant, he is also portrayed as cowardly and grossly selfish. Minnie, on the other hand, may be portrayed as consistently deviant. Yet, she is also portrayed as gentle and generous and loving. Other scholars also argue from OCasey's life that he was a sincere anti-bourgeois socialist. The text semiology makes no judgments about authors, their intentions, or possible interpretations of plays by readers or audiences. Not even about the socio-historical accuracy, whatever that might mean, of creative texts. Classifying the text semiologically as petit bourgeois is a judgment on this text and not a moral judgment on OCasey himself. Judging the work of creative artists on the basis of their personal ideology or morality may be interesting as gossip, but seems to have no academic relevance whatsoever. By metasemiology here is meant the parasemantic function of language, that is, the extra meaning which a particular language usage may carry to mark or to assign meaning to those who use such language in writing. Therefore, the language used by the author in the present text can be said to speak volumes in itself. Trickery. This play centers on the theme of deception. The title of the play refers to the deception that Donald Davoren is an IRA gunman, which he is not. He is an unfortunate poet who allows the romantic character that has been put upon him by the idle gossip of the people in the tenement house. Davoren acknowledges the role with ease. He never says that he is a gunman. He just doesn't deny it either. His deception has tragic consequences for Minnie Powell. Tommy Owens also deceives people. He talks of all the great things he would do for Ireland, and yet he does nothing. All his talk of violent rebellion and Irish freedom proves worthless when action is really needed. Maguire, who leaves the bombs at their house, is also dishonest. He lies about the contents of the bag when really it is full of IRA bombs. He too dies in the play. Dishonesty and deception seems to affect many of the characters. Indeed, Minnie Powell appears as the most honest person in the play. Ironically, it is this honesty that leads to her tragic death. Poverty. This play shows us the real life conditions of the people of Dublin during the War of Independence. The tenement house shows us the overcrowded living conditions of the people. There are several families and individuals living in one single house. Their rooms are poorly furnished. Very few of the people living there have jobs or money, and those who do have money seem to spend it on alcohol alone. Seamus Shields sells household goods door to door, but the people in the house comment that they only buy the odd item out of pity for him. The landlord calls to the door looking for rent that is already 11 weeks late. This reflects on the level of poverty that the people are experiencing. They have very few belongings in their rooms. Conflict. War is a central theme of this play. The Shadow of a Gunman shows us the real lives of the people living in the war zone that was Dublin during the War of Independence. War has led people into lives full of poverty and fear. Nobody is safe as the residents of the tenement live in fear of invasion from the cruel and vicious black and tans of the British police force. Donald Davoren grows his false status as a gunman from people's fear about the war. They are willing to believe anything and to make heroes out of nothing more than idle gossip. Many of the characters in this story are very good at talking about war, and yet they seem to take no part in it. For example, Tommy Owens talks about how he would love to go out and fight for his country, and yet he never does. Donald readily accepts the strange title of a gunman without having fought at all. In fact, Minnie Powell is the only character in the play who proves herself capable of taking action. She is the true tragic heroine of the play. All the other characters are cowards in one form or another. The text is very successful in depicting a generic Irish atmosphere. It adequately depicts a subgroup national and religious identity and splinterism in Ireland. Historical myths about subgroup ascription have also found a proper voice in this play, along with the depiction of the characteristics of perceived Irish personality traits. It would have been easy with such a wealth of detail about Irish invertedness for the text to fall into the stage Irish trap, but there is no stage Irishism in this play. For example, there are no bulls. Instead, the cognate English device of malapropism is used. The dialect writing used in this play is similar in structure, but not the same as stage Irishism or brogulam. The orthographic marking used in the text of the gunman might be used by any writer who used the device of so-called dialect writing to mark for deviancy. From a metasemiological point of view, there is no difference in how the text marks linguistically someone portrayed as nationalist Irish, Northern Unionist Irish and English. The text of The Shadow of a Gunman could serve as a prototype of petite bourgeois writing. Donald Davoren is portrayed as non-deviant. All the other major characters and most of the minor characters are portrayed consistently as deviant through the use of malapropisms, misspelling and incorrect syntax. The basis for the argument here does not depend on the stage directions, which tell us, for example, that in Seamus is frequently manifested the superstition, the fear and malignity of primitive man, or those which tell us that Minnie is not intimidated if she meets people of a superior education, as long as she meets them in the atmosphere that surrounds the members of her own class. On account of its popularity as a play depicting life during the Irish War of Independence, Shadow of a Gunman has been adapted for television as well. One of the first instances include a 1972 version starring Frank Converse and Academy Award winner Richard Dreyfuss. A later adaptation took place as part of the BBC Two performance series in 1992. This included a cast of Kenneth Branagh, Stephen Rea and Brogna Gallagher. With this, we come to the conclusion of today's lesson. Hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you.